Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the WMA podcast. My name is Jeff Nugent, and today we have joining us is Mike Bisaro. Mike joined Straightline in 2004 and has been the CEO since 2020. He received his bachelor's degree in finance from New Mexico State University and holds his AIF designation. So welcome, Mike, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, without further ado, Mike, do you want to tell us about a little bit about yourself and your journey into the financial world?
Yeah, my journey is something that is I mean, like everybody, it's evolved in several different directions. Some that I kind of probably expected, and a few that I didn't. But I came, as you said, my bachelor's degree from New Mexico State. I was actually down there for the for a golf program originally, golf management program. And didn't really think at the beginning that that would lead me to the financial services industry, but after a little bit of time, it became a very natural fit. So my undergrad degrees were in marketing and finance, and I had a minor in political theory, which as time has gone on has become perhaps as important, if not more important, than the pure financial training, especially the way that the world has evolved. If you're talking about the markets nowadays, you're talking politics.
Yeah,
So yeah, that has been very helpful as well. But my journey really, when I was getting towards getting towards graduation, I had several opportunities in kind of the more traditional corporate finance world. But I knew myself, and I knew that I probably wasn't going to be very happy staring at a spreadsheet for about 12 years,
yeah,
on a path that perhaps may have led to hopefully something more in senior financial leadership. So I was actually approached by a friend of mine that I knew from golf, actually. And actually, more specifically, my dad was approached by this friend of mine when I was in school, and he was an advisor. And long story short, he was moving into a management role. He was interested in someone coming in and asking or and helping with his book of business. And so he started talking to me about it. And the first thing I said to him was, okay, I'm 22 years old. I'm coming out of school and I'm broke. Who's going to listen to me about money?
yeah,
And he said something that stuck with me, and it's something that I think everyone, especially from your group, I think will knows at this point, but took a little time for me to internalize, is that when you come out of school with a finance background, you know more than probably about 95+% of the world about finance.
yeah,
You just don't always come in knowing that you know more than everybody.
yeah,
um, and that's not a bad thing. It takes a little bit of time to understand that. But what he said, and what I obviously learned very quickly, is that this business is really, it's a people business, okay? And like so
most
many others,
definitely.
but it is something that the financial side is important. I always say it's like you have to be able to speak the language. You have to be able to understand those things, and have the technical knowledge and backgrounds. But dealing with people, dealing with emotions, and building relationships is virtually our entire industry.
Yeah,
And he had watched me do that, and these are his words. He had watched me do that, from the time I was 14 or 15 years old, being around people who were a lot older than me, and interacting with them, primarily through golf. So it ended up being a very natural fit, for what I wanted to do, and where I think some of my skills, really kind of aligned. And so I was with him for a few years, and then switched, for a variety of reasons that, I knew that that probably wasn't the best fit long term. Still, it wasn't a bad thing or a contentious thing,
yeah.
but switched over to Straightline just a little over 20 years ago, and the journey continued.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So mentioned previously, you are the CEO at Straightline. Was there a defining moment or key experience that led you to take on the leadership role back in 2020?
Yes. I mean, there were so many, but I think if to sum it up, um, in our world, and we are a registered investment advisory firm, okay, pure registered investment advisory firm. When you get to be a certain size in our world, um, everybody comes around and wants to buy you, okay, and it's the way it was, it's the way it still is. I was not, I had a small ownership stake at that point. But we had two primary firms, 2017, 2018, 2019, that really wanted Straightline, and our founders were ready to move on from the ownership role. I wanted it. I wanted to own Straightline. I had been here at that time for about 15 years. And I had some very specific things that I wanted to do. And what really pushed it over the edge for myself and for our former ownership is that the firms that were coming in, we could see what they were going to do. They were going to come in, they were going to slap their own systems in place. They were going to take our business, which is, I'm going to use the most overused word in the financial services world, unique. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody says their firm is unique. And some people mean it more than others, but we do have some rather unusual things that we do, and some types of business that we do that most advisors don't. And I could tell that they were just going to kind of take all of those unique things and slam it into their systems and just move on. And I believed that we could do it better, from the inside. And I
Yeah.
believed that my background and my familiarity with our group of clients put me in a little bit of a different situation than a firm from the outside. Plus, I, saw an opportunity that I believed, and my wife, who was involved in the business, we worked on this very much together, as we still do. We believed that we could do it and unlock some opportunities, that people weren't able to see, and we were able to help people. It's one of the best parts about this business is that you're able to help people in a really deep, meaningful way with something that is truly at the core of their existence. And so I felt a great degree of loyalty to the people that we worked with. And yes, we saw an opportunity for ourselves to unlock a lot of value in evolving the business in ways that needed to be done. So so we did that, and it took us 2 years to put everything together, from the financing to all of the different opinions of different owners and different ownership
Yeah.
groups, a lot of owners. It took a long time to do it. We got the deal done on February 26th, 2020, after 2 years of work. And then within 3 weeks, um, everybody was locked in their basement. Basically, by the time we got all the signed paperwork back to everybody, we were locked in our basements. And the market's down 30%, and COVID had shut down the world, and no one knew if everything was going to keep spinning. And we were looking at each other saying, okay, what do we do? This is a little bit of
Yeah.
a challenge that we hadn't planned. We had a lot of projections. We had built a lot of spreadsheets projecting how this was going to work.
Yeah.
None of them had global pandemic in them 3 weeks after we started.
No.
So it made for a little bit extra stress, but we worked through it. We knew that it was going to be okay. We didn't know how long it was going to take. In some ways, it was much faster than we thought. Certainly, the market recovery, but in other ways, it still challenges us. So, yeah, I mean, I could go on for far more time than than I know we have today about
Yeah.
that. But it was a huge challenge right at the beginning. But it I believe that in hindsight, it really it helped put us in a better place. A lot of the stuff that we thought we were going to do on day one, kind of guns blazing, in hindsight, had we done them at that time, it would have been okay, but we probably would have needed to redo them relatively quickly as we learned more and more about the business and about, things that after 15 or 16 years, I thought I knew pretty well. And there were things that we still needed to learn and still do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I thought it was super interesting how when you took over that leadership role back in 2020, it was right when the pandemic started. Obviously, no one knew, what was going to happen. So I just thought that was really interesting, and it would most definitely really challenging to take over a leadership role for, an entire wealth management firm. But obviously, it worked out, and you guys have been succeeding ever since. So that's great to see.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back, what major trends do you see, shaping the future of wealth management with you taking over this leadership role, about 40 years ago, and how is kind of Straightline adapting to these new major trends?
And that's a great question. And there's so many, when you are in a leadership position of a firm, especially as an advisor, right? I mean, I still am an advisor, and
Yeah,
I come at it from an advisory background. You see it in a couple different ways. Um, I would say that you know there has been, and no one knows how this is going to evolve, honestly, with the new administration in place. But there has been a massive increase in oversight in, I mean, we're in one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country, right?
yeah, most
Um,
definitely.
and the requirements on firms of all sizes in terms of compliance and regulatory oversight, and the costs that go with that have really grown exponentially over the last few years. Now, there's a lot of talk about deregulation and some of the teeth being pulled out of some of these agencies. Time will tell, and whether that's even a good or a bad idea is it remains to be seen. There are some obvious bad things that could happen with that. There are some potentially okay things that could happen with that. But I don't see that changing. And I think that even if there's so much that is required, and there's so much that's just simply best practice, that so much of running a firm is not what you think of when you're talking about being an advisor.
Yeah,
Just dealing with individuals, dealing with their situation, dealing with investment research. Whether you do it in house or outsource it, we do it in house, with some external partners. So all of that, the tools and all of the things that go with that are constantly evolving too.
yeah,
But I think the regulatory side, the requirements on firms, it is getting more and more difficult for, especially for smaller firms, to keep up with all of the requirements that are out there. And it's one of the reasons why there has been so much consolidation in our industry, and it will continue. So, on the other side, on the in terms of things like research and the actual administration of the business, the more traditional part of the business that you think of as an
yeah,
advisor, probably no surprise here. Probably the biggest trend is the integration of technology, especially AI based tools,
yeah,
that are really kind of permeating so many areas. Um, Again, whether it's good or bad remains to be seen. I think that there's some thought out there that certain parts of the job, certain jobs in our world are going to just be eliminated by AI. I don't really believe that's true. I think that it's like anything else, like the internet when it came out, it didn't, there the same kind of prognostications were out there then, and what did it do? It
yeah,
changed the way you have to work. It didn't replace what you do. And there's an old phrase that I've heard a million times in our industry that I love, um, and it's that you can systematize and automate virtually everything in our industry.
yeah,
And maybe the best catch-all term is commoditize. You can commoditize everything in our industry except for the client relationships.
yeah,
Okay. And I don't care how good these models get, there are people out there that want help that still want to speak with you. Okay. And you know, I think one of the mistakes that people make about our industry, even sometimes advisors who are or people who are thinking of getting in, is thinking that they have to help everybody, or oh well, there's a group of people that are going to do this on their own, and there's a group of people that are using all these automated tools, or they're using Robinhood or whatever else, and that's fine, okay. And there's always been those do-it-yourselfers, and
Yeah,
quite honestly, those are not the people that really tend to want to work with advisors in the first place.
yeah,
So the do-it-yourself tools are just changing. But there are a significant number of people out there who still want this kind of help, and I believe will always want this kind of help.
yeah,
So
most
yeah,
definitely.
and when people make these big sweeping, generalities, I think it's very dangerous. Oh, well, everybody over a certain age deals with things this way. Everybody under a certain age only deals with things this way. I disagree. Clearly, the trends are stronger in those ways, but I think that people can make mistakes by those big overgeneralizations.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. But yeah, I feel like AI has been like the raving talk. I mean, everywhere you look, you go on the news, you go on your phone, you open up the Wall Street Journal, you see something about, computer chips or AI. So I think that's been the main trend, kind of could be the future wealth management. We don't know. But for me, I don't think advisors will go away. Like you said, it's that client relationship that, reels clients back in and just, wants them to feel, safe. It's almost like having another friend, having your financial advisor. So I think
No,
that's definitely why advisors will be here to stay.
agreed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So obviously, you were in college, back at New Mexico State. What kind of skills or experience should college students focus on to break into the wealth management industry? I mean, there's, tons of different tips and advice, but what do you think? What type of hold on, we're gonna cut that out. I'm gonna re-ask that question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So, uh, all right, sounds good.
Go ahead.
All right, so back we talked about your bachelor's degree in finance and marketing back at New Mexico State University. What kind of skills or experiences should college students kind of focus on to break into the wealth management industry successfully?
Yeah. So as I kind of alluded to a minute ago, you know, you need to have the financial background. I'll say it again. That's the language, right? You need that, and I know that you guys are doing a lot, especially in your program. Even in integrating tools and financial planning software programs and all of those things that you absolutely need from a technical standpoint. But you want you do want to have a bit of a well-rounded background in other areas as well. And I have always said semi-jokingly that I think advisors, you're almost better off with a psychology background than a pure finance background. The most of the math that we do, it's funny. That's the thing that comes up sometimes. People ask what we do, and people say, "Oh, you must be really good at math." You don't need to be really good at math. Okay. Most of the math we do is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Okay. A little bit of projections here or there. We're doing budgeting. These are not complicated math problems. What gets complicated is when someone calls you, and we've been dealing with this a lot lately, people who are really excited, especially after the last election. There's some people who are calling who are really excited, and really excited can be really good or really bad, really happy or really upset.
Yeah,
And they all want to make moves, right? And making sure that people don't do things that are not in their interest, and calming people down when 2008 hits, when 2020 hits, and that the market has down 30% in 3 weeks. That is, I believe, the best and most important role of an advisor. So I do believe, and again, I'm using my own background here, but I have seen this time and time again. Um, Getting a functional knowledge of politics, and understanding how decisions are being made, and how the systems work that drive these decisions. And once again, I know we are at a very unusual inflection point in our history right now. Again, and that's not a political statement. That's not saying it's good. That's not saying it's bad. But we are at a very different time.
Yeah.
So understanding the institutions behind the scenes helps. It helps you understand what is most likely to happen. And that's what we say about politics all the time. It's not our job, to say what I believe is the absolute best thing in the world or what any individual thinks is right or wrong. It's about what is most likely to happen and how do we need to position ourselves for that, whether you love it or you hate it. Okay, so I think that really studying how people think and just being around people and liking people. If you don't like people, this is not an industry that you're going to love. Okay. I mean, you can do that. You can be on the research side. You can kind of be behind the scenes. But if you want to be an advisor, um, you know, I had somebody ask one time, well, how do you make it seem like you care about these people? And I said, well, the first step, what really helps is to actually care. If you're trying to make it look like you care, it's probably not going to go real well for you, and you're not going to be real happy. And that's okay. That's not that that's that doesn't that's you just have to know that about yourself. But
Yeah.
if you genuinely like people, you like learning about people, and you like the psychology of dealing with people. And I would argue you maybe spend some time learning about that psychology either in school or some other resources and authors and thinkers out there that I think can help with that. But really taking your time to learn and understand people and what makes them tick and understanding also what type of person you work with in the best way, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another big thing in our industry, right? You don't there are people who are going to naturally work with you better than others, and that was a lesson that I learned very very early, from some people in my first office. So it's understanding, and so what really drives that is also understanding yourself, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's so many things that you can do to help you understand just how you're going to fit best in this industry. And there is a way to fit in. Okay,
Yeah.
whatever your specialty ends up being, there's room out there. There's millions and millions and millions of people that need help. And there's not nearly enough capacity in our industry to help everyone who needs help. And our industry is aging. Okay. Advisors, another lesson I learned very early is that your age in our industry goes from a liability. If you start from the beginning, your age goes from a liability to an asset and kind of goes back,
Yeah.
right? So as a firm principal owner, that's part of the thought process too, is you have to continuously be bringing people in to continuously if you want your firm to perpetuate itself, you have to bring in people that can help perpetuate the life cycle of your business.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a long answer and from multiple areas, but I think that there's so much you can do both in coursework, and just in your own endeavors that I think can be tremendously helpful.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, but that's good. That's definitely good skills. I mean, I've never heard, you definitely want to know when, how or when laws or bills are being passed, because I mean, that's definitely something I would need to touch up on as well, because you definitely want to know how the world works and how kind of the government works. So that's really good advice, and I've never really heard that, but I definitely have to start using that advice.
It's a good one,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's tricky right now,
It's
right?
very tricky right now. Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's some things that are kind of going through the system in a little unusual way, and it's a hot button issue right now. So, but being able to talk about that, being able to talk about politics with people from all different backgrounds who have very different opinions, and
Yeah.
very polarized opinions right now is also a skill. So the more background you have, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Especially when dealing with clients, because I mean, you have clients that come from all different backgrounds, believe in all different things, but you're focused on your client and helping, them meet their goals and, just help out with their financials. So I think that's the best thing about it, just helping out your clients.
Absolutely.
Leading into our last question, we kind of touch on this a little bit, how every firm calls themselves unique.
Yep.
So there's so many good advisors today. How do you kind of separate yourself from, the rest of the advisors and the rest of the different RIA firms? And what specifically do you do that, other firms don't?
Yeah. So the probably the core thing, and it's not, individually unique. We're not the only firm that does this, but there are not a ton of firms that do this type of business that we focus a lot inside of existing retirement plans, in 401ks, 403bs. And we are structured in a way, and we have the desire to work with people and help manage their assets while they are still working. Okay. Most advisors are not able to touch employer sponsored plans like 401ks and 403bs. They're either not set up correctly to do it, or they frankly don't have the desire to do it because it's not real easy and it's become more complicated over time. But that was really what Straightline was built to do, was to most advisors will try and build relationships with people when they get close to retirement. They're trying to get their assets, their rollover assets, and then start to plan for that relationship over time. And when Straightline was founded, really it was the realization that, well, if you want to really impact someone's life, we need to be working with them along the way. We need to be, helping with decisions along the way.
Yeah,
From people we work with people who are just getting started, who are in their first job sometimes. But for many people, the largest investment asset that they have is their workplace asset, their 401k, right, or their 403b. So Straightline was built, really from our foundation, to work with those types of assets and to directly manage those, in a discretionary way for people while they are still working. Of course, we are a full service advisor. We can work with any assets that people have outside of their plan as well.
yeah,
Um, but many firms are not able to integrate all of the assets that people have.
yeah,
So that's our version of unique. So it's led us to some specialties, and really some niches that we really didn't even expect when we started. One of them is in higher education. We work with a lot of higher education institutions, and the 403bs in higher education, with companies primarily like TIAA, Fidelity to a slightly lesser extent. They have some rules and some procedures in them that are very different than most corporate 401ks. So we work with a lot of institutions, and we spend a lot of time at Michigan State, to be one specific one. We actually have an office in East Lansing for this reason, because we have a lot of relationships with folks out there. But there are some unusual aspects of retirement plans in the higher ed space, and we've become very specialized in that area. And it's led us to a lot of other institutions as well, because the higher ed world is very connected. It's not the same as the corporate world, where there's really an inherent competitive nature. There's some in higher ed, and I'm not talking about rivalries. I'm talking about actually the schools working together. It's a much
yeah,
more collaborative world than the corporate world.
yeah,
So when we've developed this specialty, and it's led us to a lot of new opportunities, primarily in higher education. So it's been it's been the primary way that we've grown and expanded over the years, is by working with the employers. They bring us in, and then we work with the employees. We don't really work with the employers directly, but they bring us in with some level of a seal of approval,
yeah,
sometimes formal, sometimes informal. But then we are able to come in and work directly with the employees underneath their umbrella. And it's the primary way we've expanded over the years.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like a lot of different firms kind of take on, a certain niche or niche, and then they kind of just roll with it. So they just try to take on different referrals or different clients that kind of are on that same group. So I think it's really interesting that you have that with the higher education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I
So
mean, we're not exclusive to it, but it has been our primary driver for 16 or 17 years now.
yeah, especially in our area with Michigan, Michigan State, Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan. There's a ton of colleges in our area. So,
There's a lot.
there's yeah, so there's definitely tons of ways to gain clients through that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's all I have for us today, Mike. I really appreciate you hopping on the Wealth Management Association podcast. And I most definitely will know the people watching and the next generation of financial advisors will most definitely use your advice to the fullest. So I really appreciate you being on here.
Thank you, Jeff. I really, I love your program. I love what you guys are doing. It is so needed in our world, to be producing, the next generation of people that are going to take over our industry, and coming into it with the skills that I know you guys are working on. So, I think it's wonderful what you're doing, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed the discussion, please like and share the podcast on Apple and Spotify. The Spartan Journal podcast is part of Michigan State University's Wealth Management Association, a student organization whose goal is to inspire the next generation of financial advisors. The Spartan Journal news team releases a newsletter every Monday morning comprised of financial literacy and the week's market updates. Feel free to follow us on social media at msuwma and check out our website at msuwma.com. Anything heard on either the MSUWMA or Spartan Journal podcasts is for educational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice.